Here we see the setup for the very first and least complex firefight. Firefight number 1. Partisans. Each firefight is broken up into a series of rounds. The number of rounds will be specified for each scenario in the firefight scenario book. Play begins by activating a unit. We'll choose this German rifle squad. We're going to move him onto the board. And when we activate a new unit, the default is 7 action points for each new unit activated. Moving our unit onto the board costs 1 action point in movement. Play then shifts to the Soviet player, who can do the same thing. For example, moving this rifle squad, giving him his 7 points for activation, and then deducting 1 for the move we just made. Let's say, for example, we want our German rifle squad here to fire on this Soviet rifle squad. It costs 3 action points to fire. Every action you take must be paid for with action points. Now, a quick word about command action points. In the firefight book, it specifies how many command action points each player receives at the beginning of each round. These command action points are finite, so once you use them up, they're gone until the next round. Let's say we wanted to, we could pay for that firing action. We could use 2 action points plus 1 command action point to pay for our rifle squad's firing action against the Soviet. Now, the Germans' firepower against soft targets, shown here in red, is 2. Roll 2 dice, add that total to the unit's firepower, and then compare it to the frontal defense rating of the Soviet. If it's equal to or greater than the enemy unit's defensive number, this unit would take a hit. A quick word about unit facing. Every unit has a facing and must face a hex side. This area is what is in the unit's forward frontal area. These hexes would be in the unit's flank. Here we can see this would be the frontal area of the Soviet unit. So we would be trying to beat the defensive number of the Soviets' frontal defense. Any terrain defense modifiers, such as light woods, would add additional modifiers to a unit's defense number. For the sake of this demonstration, we'll just say that our German hit the Soviet. Damage is resolved by drawing a damage chit for infantry out of a cup. A unit that's damaged will now suffer whatever modifiers are shown on the damaged chit. This berserk chit will now subtract 1 from the action points needed for a unit to fire, add 1 to their firepower ratings, add to their defensive rating, but decrease their range. Damage counters are placed underneath a damaged unit. One more hit, and this unit is destroyed and removed from the board. Had our German unit been firing into the Soviets' flank, we would have used the flank defensive rating number for the Soviet. Another action that a player can take is to stall. For example, let's say this Soviet machine gun position has a nice little trap laid outside the control hex. He's activated, but he doesn't want to do anything. He wants to stall and let the German make a move first. For a cost of 1 action point, he can stall, but not have to flip his unit over to the spent side. He can keep that unit activated for his next turn if he wants to take a shot at the German with his machine gun. How about a quick word about opportunity actions? During this game, for example, we'll say our Maxim machine gun is the currently activated unit. What happens up here if this German light machine gun waltzes across, stupidly exposing his flank to this Soviet rifle unit? The Soviet rifle unit is fresh, but it has not been activated. The Soviet player has the option of an opportunity action. He can fire on this German unit. But of course, once that's done, he must then flip his unit to the spent side. He will no longer be able to activate that unit for a normal activation phase. How do we coordinate our units if we can only have 1 unit activated at a time? Well, actually, you can activate more than 1 unit at a time. Let's say our light machine gun here is the currently activated unit, and he currently has 6 activation points left. But we want to move this rifle squad into that Soviet unit's flank. We can share an activation and have both of these units drawing from the same activation point pool. The result, however, is now that these 2 units have shared the same pool of activation points, once those activation points reach 0, both of these units will be flipped to their spent side, and they're done for this round. What about our previous scenario, where Knucklehead German machine gun exposes his flank to a Soviet unit? What if that Soviet unit has already been spent and used up all of his activation points for that round? Well, that's where the beauty of command action points come into play. Even a spent unit can still fire on this German machine gun using command action points. We would use command action points to fire on this German unit. But remember, command action points are only refreshed at the beginning of the next round. We've just used up 4 of them to take this firing action here. There's another type of activation that you can employ. It's a group activation. What this means is units that either share the same hex or are in hexes adjacent to each other can take the same action while only paying the cost for the most expensive unit. For example, let's say I wanted to move both of these units forward one space. I would pay the movement cost only for the most expensive unit to move. In this case, they're the same, so I would only deduct one action point. Another group action would be a group firing action. For example, I can designate this light machine gun as the lead firing unit, pay his 2 action point cost to fire. This rifle squad in support of the light machine gun would add 1 to the light machine gun's firepower. This light machine gun would then be firing with a firepower of 5 at the Soviet unit. Another action a player can take is to pass. By passing, any currently activated units would be flipped to their spent side. Any remaining action points for that unit would be lost. On the opposing player's turn, he can also pass. If both players pass consecutively, that is the end of round. Move on to the next round, refresh command action points, flip your units to their fresh side, and begin the next round new. That's the way play goes, with turns alternating back and forth between each player until each player passes consecutively, moving on to the next round. Victory points are scored by moving into a control hex and taking control of it. 1 victory point is also scored anytime an enemy unit is destroyed and removed from the map. Destroyed units are placed on the command action track. The player with the losing unit loses a command action point on the next round for each unit they have destroyed. At the end of the final round, each player totals up their victory points, and the player with the most victory points wins the firefight. That's our basic turn mechanics for Conflict of Heroes Awakening the Bear. Thank you for joining me for Nuts and Bolts, everybody. Happy gaming.